Kentucky and the rest. But Congress and the previous administrations, as I say, were mostly throwing money at the issue rather than policy change. A lot of discussion about policy change, but not much policy change. Probably the big exception to that was the conservation programs in NRCS, which were significant changes, improvements. However, in the last year and a half, we've seen both the administration and Congress, and you've just heard a lot of the discussion from the administration standpoint, discussions about real changes in policy. I think ASFPM is both encouraged and we're concerned about some of these proposed changes. And I'll put that in context by grouping them into what I call the good, bad, and the ugly. To start with, you've heard a lot of the good up here just now. Okay, I think these are some very, very positive efforts these are the starts, these are the things that need to start happening before we can effectuate some of this policy change in a positive direction. The one thing we're really pleased with is this effort to get the agencies back together, the Federal Interagency Floodplain Management Task Force that's been led by the Corps and FEMA, CEQ to do this. I think it's extremely important after a 15-year hiatus to get together again and start talking about these conflicting issues and what we can do about them. Both John and Rock talked about the principles and standards, and that effort extremely important. The executive order, there's been spurts at that. Jerry Galloway and I have been pushing that since Hector was a pup, for sure. After the '93 floods, as you know, Jerry pushed that very heavily, and every administration has made a run at it. Just never been able to make it happen. And we're very optimistic that updating that executive order to reflect new technology, new concern, new approaches, making sure that federal monies are spent appropriately. That's really what it's about. It's not directing states and locals to do anything. It's saying to the federal agencies, if you're going to use your resources and technical capabilities, let's do the right thing. We know how especially important that is when it comes to critical facilities that are not operable during extreme events, Katrina being the poster child for that. FEMA's effort at rethinking the NFIP. This is an important activity, extremely important, and as you heard here this morning, you are the people that can have a real influence on that, and I know Sandra and crew gave you that message yesterday. So Mike Grimm, I probably should give you his phone number directly, but no, I won't do that. But you need to be telling Mike what you think needs to change in the crew. We'll be helping FEMA reach out in that effort to make sure all of you get ample opportunity to do that. These watershed approaches that I think EPA and the Corps and others are leading on is extremely important. Flood risk management, instead of floodplain management or just levees or dams, but looking at it in a flood risk management approach. I really want to give the Corps of Engineers, starting with Don Riley, who really pushed this, and now with Hecker and Pete Rabone, this is an extremely important effort, and FEMA is joining in this with a strong approach, and this is really how we need to get to where we are going. Putting together those structural and non-structural approaches in combinations with other tools, and with all agencies, states, and the locals. I'm encouraged that the federal agencies are starting to incorporate new adverse impact approaches in some of their things that they're talking about. This helps balance that who benefits and who pays equations that is not now working in a way that we want it to work. Let me talk a little bit about the bad. The bad, in some ways, is those things that we've known for a long time that aren't working and that do need to be changed. I don't want to pick on any particular agencies. I think you could find some of this in the 180 recommendations in our national flood programs for any agency, but there are some real key ones that need to move along. We are allowing, in fact, massive development in high-risk areas. It continues to happen, despite the fact that flood costs continue to go up. We're not reducing flood costs. We're doing all this activity, structurally and non-structurally, but flood damages are still increasing. Why? Because Development is still occurring in high-risk areas, especially in coastal storm surge areas and in deep floodplains, where catastrophic events have catastrophic consequences. These are places where we cannot build structures safely and we can't evacuate people safely. We need to think about that. We need to use common sense solutions to this. I'm hearing that people in California in those deep floodplains where the water gets 30 feet deep or 20 feet deep are worried about people can't get out, so they're going to go on the second floor and put in decks on the second floor so they can vertically evacuate to a deck on their second floor of their house. This isn't solutions, people. This is Band-Aids on cancer. We're allowing new development in floodways through a farcical process called no-rise certificates, which totally ignore cumulative impacts when we know they're going to happen. We continue now, we're building 100-year levees in highly urbanized areas with critical facilities behind them. The Corps never used to do that. Now they do it. Why? Because the community doesn't want anything more than a 100-year levee, do they? Because that gets them out of buying flood insurance and regulations. Those policies are conflicting, and they're leading us down a primrose path. We've talked about it, but we're not changing it yet, and hopefully it will. Disaster assistance, we continue to provide disaster assistance time and time and time again. The least a community or citizen does to prevent cost and damages, the more apt they are to get our federal dollars. That's a negative incentive. And we think people are going to change behavior if you do that? Levy O&M, the same thing. Yes, we were supposed to maintain our levy. We promised to maintain it, but we didn't. But now we need federal money because we didn't do it. Think about it. Those people that did do their good O&M, they're helping support now those that didn't do it. We got to change that. And we continue to use the same process for communicating risk. I hope all of you took what Dennis said yesterday to heart. He's right. If we think people are going to start to magically understand the term 100-year flood, or people will understand probability, we're smoking rope, people. It's not going to happen. This loss of natural resources functions is something we need to turn around. We heard a lot of discussion about that here this morning, and I know those efforts are underway, but we're realizing that that loss of natural resources function is impacting our economy. We rely on those natural resources.